Hey everybody, welcome to Enduro360.com here in the Enduro360 garage, which I do promise to get cleaned up one of these days. Hey, we're just unloading from the first Enduro of the year, the District 37 UMC Enduro, and we had a fantastic time. Big turnout this year, lots of new riders, so I was thinking as I was unloading the bike and starting to take it apart that I'd take a few minutes and show you a little bit about my Enduro setup on the bike, where I put all the parts and pieces, a few of the tips I've learned, and maybe it'll help you be a little more prepared for your next Enduro. Now I have to tell you, after having my first ride, my first race on the 350, I have a whole new appreciation for this bike. This thing is pretty amazing once you get it into full race mode. Honestly, anytime you're testing a new motorcycle, I just don't see how you can get a great opinion of it without actually racing it, because it's just about the only time any of us really push a bike and ourselves kind of to the absolute limits to see how far we can go. So getting back to our Enduro setup, let's start with right here on the bars. Now first of all, if you're racing, you want to be serious about Enduros, you've got to have an ICO checkmate. I mean, that's just all there is to it. There's some other products out there, but if you want to win, this is what the pros use. Or at least back when we used to have pros that raced traditional Enduros. Alright, setting up your checkmate on the bike. First thing you've got to do is get the thumb switch on. Got to have it right here where you can get to it easy to do your long holds and your bumps each direction. The mounting for this is a little bit fragile with just the plastic cover on the back. So you can see what I've done is I've drilled a hole here, and I actually run a zip tie all the way around it just to give it a little extra stability in case you crash. If I were to crash and actually break this off, I could run another zip tie through here and it would get me through the end of the race. Got to move the kill button inside on the bars here. Some riders move it to the opposite side of the bar, but if you run full width bars, you should be able to get that in okay. Next we have our roll chart. Really important is you've got to have this thing set up firm enough that it's not going to flop around on you. I use zip ties on mine. It's just a whole lot easier than trying to deal with the hose clamp. My rubber band has long since broke, so I have a hair rubber band in there just to hold the tension on the reel, and that works just fine. For desert racing, we run it without the cover on it. That way it just gives you a little better view of what's going on. But if you're racing in any kind of wet weather conditions, you got to get that thing sealed up. One of the things you can see here on my roll chart is I have highlighted every speed change. That helps me keep track during the race of when speed changes are coming up so that I can see them and just be prepared for them. One other thing on here is, this is one of the secret pro tips that not many people will tell you about. When you install this thing in, you want to take and run a strip of Scotch tape all the way down the entire length of the back of it. That way you can't accidentally tear the roll chart. Particularly if you get in wet conditions and this thing gets a little bit wet, it'll just tear and it'll come right apart. With that strip of Scotch tape along the back, that'll hold it all together for you. Got the ICO mount right here in the center. As you can see, we've got mount on flex bars. I'll move around the other side to show you the setup that I've got there, how we put that on the bike. And then right over here I've got my watch. I always run two watches, one on the bike, one on my wrist, just as a backup. And keep in mind, when we're setting a watch for an Enduro, what we want to do is we want to set the actual time back to match our start time, so that when I start the event, it should be reading 8 o'clock straight up. So for example, I was on minute 31, so I would set my actual watch display back to read 7:29, or 30 minutes earlier than what actual clock time is. The other thing about clocks now, most of our Enduros are using atomic clocks, so they're super accurate. What I found is I can actually go on the computer at home, look up the actual US clock time, set my watches at home, and then I just double check them against the key time when I get to the event. But if we're all working off atomic time, that's just one less thing I have to worry about when I get to the event. Now I've got one other super secret thing here. This is kind of a pro tip. I make little cheat sheets that I tape right here inside of my handguard. What this is I've written the resets down for loop 2 at 6.8 and 32.8. Resets are really important for two things. One is you don't want to get behind schedule and blow through a reset without realizing it. That way, if I get behind on my roll chart, I can just take a quick glance here and see where my resets are. Of course, the other thing is if I go through a check at, say, 6.4, and even if I'm late, I know I've got a reset coming up, and I can just cruise up that other 4/10 till I hit the reset. Really important. Resets are such a critical part of understanding what's going on during the race. Right there, I've got a quick review of exactly what's going on. So that was for loop 2 of this event. And then right over here, I have my loop 3 resets. So that's our basic setup on the bars for going through a traditional enduro. Now let's move around to the front here real quick. Flex bars. Flex bars present a little bit of a challenge because there's not a real set mounting system for them. I looked at a couple of different things and basically I made my own. What I did was I went down to Home Depot and I bought these. They're pipe clamps. So they've got a rubber insert in them, and I don't remember exactly what size. I think they're 5/8. And then they just mount to the bolting post that's right on the back of the checkmate. And then what I've done is I've cut up a piece of grip right here that you can see that I've used as a rubber buffer to help it all mount up nice and firm. Actually, what I really like, it looks a little Rube Goldberg, but it has a little bit of flexibility to it. So if I were to crash really hard, the chances of me breaking this are very slim. I could knock it out of position, but then I can just bend it right back into position. I've been running this for about 1.5 years, and actually it works just great. I still got room in there to mount my steering dampener, which we don't have on this particular bike, but really happy with that. These are the 2 connections for the ICO. Some people run tape on these just to make them extra secure as far as the connections, but I've never really had any problems, so I just double check them right before the start of the event. And then the last thing on setup is getting your odometer pickup correct. It's really important just to have this. So right down here, we run it into the brake caliper mount, run it around the back side of the caliper, a couple of zip ties to hold it in position. And then as we get up here in this section, I run it straight up on the inside of the brake cable and up through this plastic brake guide. You have to be really careful on the KTMs because if this is sitting outboard, it'll rub against this plastic and it will actually wear a hole right through the ICO cable just because the plastic hits on it so hard. So I run it straight through this section, then I wrap it just to take care of the extra distance up around here, put a piece of tape on it to loop it back under, and I've had real good luck with that. You can see I'm running top quality numbers. I always keep a little pink and orange duct tape in the van, that way I can make my own numbers, and believe it or not, they look kind of cheesy, but they're super legible. People can see me coming for a long ways off. And that is some of our setup tips for your enduro equipment on your motorcycle. You can see the zip ties right there for my roll chart, and actually that holds that on there very securely. Now the other part of my enduro kit is my box here. I have one box I use that carries all my enduro specific stuff in it. So what we've got in there, I've got my checkmate instructions. I always want to have those with me. I got some other super secret instructions here courtesy of Paul Clipper. These are not available online anymore, so I'm going to try to reprint those. I've got a little holder that I keep the ICO in when I'm traveling with it. I've got my 3x5 route cards and my route card holder. These I will use typically for like a qualifier style enduro where we're not running all the equipment. I just need to write my times on something, have it handy on the bike. I've got the Scotch tape. That of course is for taping the back of my roll chart. Collection of pens and highlighters for highlighting things like speed changes and resets on the roll chart. Extra parts. This I've got a extra magnet, some extra mounting parts. I also have a spare cable for the odometer pickup on the ICO. This is one I actually damaged one time. I've repaired it, so now I just carry it as a spare. Believe it or not, I've lent that out to a couple of guys more than once because those are easy to damage. So those are the extra parts that make up my enduro specific box.